Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we have an interesting episode that I put together because we have a pretty slow news cycle for the Orlando Magic coming off of Summer League. And with that being the case, I pulled inspiration from a different podcast for a different team to give you guys an interesting look at the outlook of our squad going into next season. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. And let's go ahead and get right into the video. So I saw an episode, shout out to these guys, of the Locked On Hornets podcast, where they conducted an experiment of who would be the 8 players they would keep for the Charlotte Hornets roster if there was to be an expansion draft this upcoming season. And so that got me thinking, the Orlando Magic just got significantly deeper across the board, especially at the backcourt position. If they were forced to have to only keep 8 guys with everything that they've done and the guys that they've developed and the guys that they still even believe in on their roster, who would they want to keep? Now, you have to factor in contracts. You obviously need to factor in continuity. You also need to factor in upside and all of those things that need to be taken into consideration where you have long term flexibility from a cap perspective to be able to sign the rest of your roster beyond the 8 guys that are on the board. And then on top of that, you still want to have the kind of talent to be competitive after having to potentially let go one or more of your players in an expansion draft. So, with that being the case, we're going to go through the 8 players the Orlando Magic would keep in an 8 player keep system for an expansion draft. In my personal opinion, these are my 8 players that I think the Orlando Magic would and should keep in an 8 player safety valve if there were to be an expansion draft. You guys follow along in the comment section down below. I split this into 2 players per section with their own archetypes, and you guys let me know down in the comment section, who would you bump out, who would you switch in. Would you like this to be something that you consider for a bunch of other teams? Like if there's any other teams that you think would be interesting to do a similar exercise with. Not that we necessarily do it on the Orlando Magic podcast, but there's definitely some interesting content that can still be made around an 8-man rotation based topic. So let me know that in the comment section down below. But let's start off with the 2 franchise cornerstones, Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner. Very simple, right? Two 25 plus point per game type scorers, 2 ball handling wings. Paulo Banchero has real MVP upside. Franz Wagner has the upside to be in the conversation with like what Gordon Hayward was for the Utah Jazz, or even as high as being to the caliber of maybe what Jaylen Brown has been. Maybe not the Finals MVP part, but what Jaylen Brown has been to the Celtics rebuild next to Jason Tatum. These 2 guys are obvious keeps, first of all, obvious keeps, and 2 guys that you would just want to make sure you had at least one of moving forward after picking 8 players to be able to protect. Because let's be honest, if you let one of these talents walk out the door, foolish. It doesn't matter what the price tag is. Next, let's move to our stabilizers. Desmond Bane, who you just acquired, and Jalen Suggs. First of all, establishing the backcourt, right? Establishing the backcourt with the talent of an on-ball threat in Desmond Bane, who has the ability on ball to be able to create his own shot, do a lot more with the Rock since being drafted from TCU, has expanded himself as a more efficient three-point shooter, closing in on around 38, 39% from beyond the arc and very deadly off the catch. And then you have Jalen Suggs, an all NBA caliber defender, arguably the best defender on the team, and I think a top 5 defender at the point guard position, top 5 defender in the backcourt positions. That's both between point guard and shooting guard. Whether or not you believe that he's a top defender across the entire league, regardless of position, that gets a little bit trickier when you're talking about what translates long term. But if we're just talking about what he is as a high level defender in the backcourt, easily one of the best in the league, right up there with Drew Holiday, Alex Caruso, Amen Thompson, so on and so forth. So a guy that I think is a foundational piece for a defensive identity that the Orlando Magic have been trying to build for years, and he has to be a mainstay on this team while Desmond Bane continues to add that three-point shooting the Orlando Magic have desperately needed. You get high-level three-point shooting from both of these from both of these players, which also brings so much to the table when you think about how they're able to spread the floor next to Franz Wagner and next to Paulo Banchero. So now you've established your front court and you've establish your backcourt. This next one is going to be where a lot of people might be a little shaken up. I think the top four is where everybody kind of is in cool agreement, but the next four is where things obviously get very interesting. So we're going to go to the supporting cast. And guess what, man? I trust Goga Batazde and Tristan da Silva. In a situation like this, obviously, if you could only keep eight, my assumption is that we would be able to keep Goga Batazde long term. And I'm totally cool with that. For anybody who's watched this podcast for the last couple of weeks, the thing that I've been saying about Goga Batazde in terms of him being a trade asset is more about the fact that he only has this year and one more season left on his contract. So he's expiring that will probably be due for a real payday, given the fact that when he has played on the floor, both for the Orlando Magic and even dating back to his time in short spurts with the Indiana Pacers in their early stints and things of that nature, but more so on the Orlando Magic over the last 2 years, he's been absolutely super productive. He's been a guy that's been highly effective on the defensive end. He's a guy that does show offensive upside as a guy who can, sprint the floor, runs in transition, and is a good finisher around the rim, good rim defender, a guy that I feel like you could trust to give you 15 to 20 minutes plus of just high level motor, and a dude who I think can develop into a more well rounded center to go from maybe 9 points, such and such points, to around 11 to 12 points with a more expanded role, even maybe up to 14 points with a more expanded role, because although he's not a 3 point shooter, I feel like his defensive hustle and effort is something that creates easy opportunities for him by itself. And then if he has a solid point guard, like a Suggs, for example, it gives him real flexibility to maybe even get some more easy baskets in transition. So I actually believe a lot more in Goga Batazde than I lit on, but it has a lot more to do with his contract situation, given the state of the Orlando Magic right now, where I don't think they can afford to give another guy $20+ million, especially when in this situation, Goga Batadze is going to be a backup power forward slash center for this team. So giving another guy $20 million on top of what they got going with Bain, Suggs, Franz, and Paulo Banchero, I just don't think it's feasible. That's the reason why he's one of the biggest trade targets. But if we're just talking about talent, I actually think Goga Batadze might be the most reliable center out of every center on the Orlando Magic. That includes Wendell Carter Jr., that includes Jonathan Isaac, and that includes Mo Wagner. I think that if you're talking about front court players behind Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero, the next player I trust the very most in terms of being able to give me 15 to 20 minutes of highly productive play, I'm gonna be honest. I think it is Goga Batadze, and then my other player is Tristan da Silva. I think that again. I think I've said this on a handful of episodes. When talking about Tristan da Silva, I'm very high on him as a ball handling wing. I think at the backup forward position, he can be a guy who can expand his game as a knockdown 3 point shooter. I think his defense can grow into something more translatable from a perspective of being a guard 1 through 3 with a chance to even maybe guard small ball fours in certain situations. I think he has the versatility to be a guy that can be like a Swiss Army knife type at the small forward position. And I think that as he continues to improve as a catch and shoot 3 point shooter, he can become even more deadly when you have facilitators like Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero around him to be able to open up the floor, given the fact that those guys put so much pressure on the paint. So I think what Franz does next to a guy like Tristan da Silva, and even for a guy like Tristan da Silva from a developmental perspective, a lot certain things like them playing on the Germany team in Eurobasket, I think are very good for his development. And I think long term, he can be a guy who fits really good in a role that's highly requested and highly touted around the league, which is a 3 and D wing. But I think you pair that with the fact that I think Tristan da Silva has real on ball chops, and now you've expanded yourself into this guy who, yes, can be a knockdown 3 point shooter with high level defense, but you can put pressure on the rim. You can create facilitating opportunities off of pick and roll situations. You can do these type of things where you open up the offense even more because you have facilitators around you, and now you're a guy who can knock down the three at a high enough clip where people have to respect it so much that when you put the ball on the floor, there's a lot more pressure to make different decisions. So I actually really, really like Goga Batadze and Tristan da Silva for this team. And if I can only keep eight, I definitely would like to keep these two on the squad. And then last but not least, I'm going with the rookies, man. I'm going with the rookies. I like Jace Richardson. I've been saying it for the last few episodes, and I'm going to keep hammering it home. I think that Jace Richardson deserves to be the backup two guard, and in this situation, especially when you're factoring contracts in and things of that nature, you want to keep a handful of rookies on the roster. Two guys that I really believe in are Richardson and Noah Pinda. I think Noah Pinda at 6'9" can improve as a high level defender just given his athleticism. Will he be a crazy shot blocker like Jonathan Isaac? I don't think so. But with his high energy and effort, do I think he automatically can replace a guy like Mo Wagner? Yes. Do I think his ball handling and offensive acumen in space and especially in transition allow him to be a guy who can replace a guy like Jonathan Isaac who can only play about 15 to 17 minutes a game and be highly effective? Yes. I think Noah Pinda can be a guy who can give you 20, 25 minutes of being a ball handler, bringing the ball up the court, making decisions, operating in transition, being a good swing man, glue guy type in the half court settings. I think that he can improve as a 3-point shooter, and if he can even be a league average 3-point shooter, he's a much, much more dangerous player. I've said this before. I think Noah Pinda could be a Ben Simmons type guy, who Ben Simmons in his iteration even now, right? Let's say even the Ben Simmons of this age, granted he's on the free agency block still, but his skill set says he can be a small ball center for you who's a connector piece, high level defender, can swing the ball around, operate in transition, give you these really good offensive sets where he's a dude who can be a good screen setter or a good pass to pass assist type where it's just constantly moving the ball around and creating this level of high quality offense by moving the ball around at a high rate. And I think Noah Pinda is a really good decision maker, which also makes me feel like he can average 5, 6 assists kind of just in his sleep. And then Jace Richardson, as I said before, knockdown 3-point shooter, the ability to put the ball on the floor, can be a backup two guard, can play the point guard position, which means he can fill in really well behind either of these Desmond Bain or Jalen Suggs. I just really believe in what Jace Richardson brings to the table. Not to mention when you talk about what Pinda does as a ball handler, he's another guy who almost can serve as a pseudo backup guard for you as well. Not to mention the fact that his size gives him the ability to play the 4 and maybe even small ball 5 in certain situations. So yes, that would mean Jet Howard, no more on the squad potentially. Wendell Carter Jr., no more on the squad potentially. Jonathan Isaac, no more on the squad potentially. Anthony Black, no longer on the squad. Tyus Jones, who's on a 1 year, $7 million deal, so it would make sense to kind of let him rock because why would you protect a player that you might not even be able to bring back after one season, right? So that's another guy that, despite the fact that I love the Tyus Jones signing, I wouldn't keep him in an 8 player protection system where you can only keep 8 guys from a potential expansion draft, right? So yeah, those are my 8 guys. To go back through, the 8 guys I would keep is Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner. I would keep Tristan Da Silva. I would keep Goga Batazde. I would keep Desmond Bain. I would keep Jalen Suggs, and I would keep Jace Richardson, and I would keep Noah Pinda. The players that would be on the block for the potential expansion teams to be able to draft would be guys like Anthony Black, Jet Howard, Tyus Jones, Jonathan Isaac, Wendell Carter Jr. Those are the guys that would end up probably on the block. Mo Wagner as well would be another one. With that being the case, you guys let me know in the comment section down below. Did I get my 8-man list right? Who would you guys swap out and who would you replace with the player you're taking off my list? And give me your list in full in the comment section down below. I'll be looking down there and checking. I think my list was pretty solid, taking into account not only upside, but financial capability as well as continuity within this roster while still keeping legitimate star power. So I think this was just like a really interesting exercise. Again, shout out to those guys over at Locked On Hornets who do a really good job and help give the inspiration for this idea because I think it's a really interesting one. Again, given the fact that the Orlando Magic just had a really strong offseason built off of building their depth. What if they were at risk of losing that depth due to an expansion draft? What players would be or cornerstone players to hold on to long term and not allowed to be potentially poached from you? Just an interesting exercise for a team like the Orlando Magic, who have real good upside as a deep roster going into next season. But with that being the case, again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content, and I will see you guys next episode. Peace.